The lady from District 18.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to debate against the bill.
The lady has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year, some scholars at Princeton University conducted a study to determine whether we still live in a democracy in the United States. And they looked at approximately 1,800 policy issues. They looked over a span of 10 years. And they looked at Americans from a variety of different income levels. And they determined, they were trying to determine whether people are getting what they want in terms of policy. Because presumably, if there's a policy that the vast majority of people support, it would become law if we live in a democracy. But what they found was something very different. What they found was that for the vast majority of people, there was almost no correlation between what they wanted and the policies that benefited them and what actually became law. But they found that there was a nearly perfect correlation for those in the top 10% of income. So they concluded that actually we don't really live in a democracy anymore, that the rich and powerful are able to use the levers of government to get what they want, and the rest of America is left out in the cold. And I think House Bill 380 is pretty much Exhibit A for that hypothesis. You have a handout in front of you with a bar chart. So let's look at where the money lands. Those at the bottom of the income spectrum, in the bottom 20%, are going to get approximately $7 from this tax relief, while those at the very top, in the top 1%, are going to get more than $800 on average. This bill, to a factor of more than 100 times, they will get a benefit from this tax cut versus those on the bottom. In terms of absolute dollars, of the $30 million this will cost, the vast majority of that is going to land in the laps of the very wealthiest Idahoans. Why would we do this? Do we really think that the gap between rich and poor in this nation isn't big enough, and that the Idaho legislature needs to step in to see if we can just drive that gap a little wider? Because that's surely what this bill will do. Now, the anti-Robin Hood effects of this bill, I think, go far beyond just looking at the dollars and where they land in this tax cut. Because when you funnel money away from public services, the biggest problem is that the people most hurt from those lost services are those at the bottom. And I'm just going to pick one example. It just came up in committee yesterday. School counselors, right? These are the folks that counsel kids on what their options are, what colleges they might go to, how they could go about setting a course to pursue higher education. Currently in the state of Idaho, we have one counselor for every 434 students. Experts say that's far, far too few. That should never be go beyond one for every 250 students. So we have about half as many counselors as we need. Now, rich families, this doesn't hurt them as much. Wealthy families, they've probably gone to college. They can probably coach their own kids on how you go about getting into college and what their options are. They can hire an SAT tutor to make sure their kids do well on tests. The kids that are hurt when we underfund those, by far the most, are the poor kids. Those are the kids that are never going to go to college because we're not providing those resources. Those are the kids that are going to live in poverty their whole lives because we're shortchanging the system. Now, is that kid from a low-income family going to be better off with a counselor to help them go to college, or are they going to be better off with $7 in a grocery tax credit? Are they going to be better off having a decent math teacher in their school, or with $7? And we haven't even restored our school funding to 2009 levels, not even counting for inflation or significantly increased enrollment. I have no idea why we are talking about stripping tens of millions of dollars out of the general fund that funds education when we haven't even reached 2009 levels in order to give a cut to our top earners who don't need it and frankly aren't even asking for it. In fact, we're hearing the exact opposite. Our recently retired director of the Department of Commerce said this is exactly what we don't need. And many leaders in our business community have said far and away the greatest crisis facing Idaho in terms of growth and competitiveness is workforce development and education, not a top 1/10% marginal income tax rate for the top earners. But since the good gentleman raised the issue of being competitive, I think we should talk about that. Let's talk about our competitiveness. Please, please meet with our university presidents who will tell you that our professors are making 20% less than their counterparts at universities in other states. And they are finding it nearly impossible to attract and retain the skilled professors that our students need. Is that competitive? I would say it is not. And when you get to K-12, it's even worse. The average salaries of our public school teachers are 48th in the nation. Is that competitive? No. Our average starting salaries for teachers in Idaho are just over $31,000. In Wyoming, it's $43,000. In Nevada, it's $35,000. In Washington State, it's $36,000. Are we competitive? We clearly are not. Now, the one area in which maybe we are competitive is that we're fourth in the nation for having the most teacher shortages. We lead the nation in number of minimum wage jobs. I don't think these are the areas we want to be competitive in, but believe me, if we pursue policy like this, these are the areas we will continue to be the most competitive in. Now, with respect to the gentleman raised where our highest income tax level is, that's just one metric. When you look at the entire picture, we know our tax system's a three-legged stool. When you look at aggregate, we are extremely competitive. We actually have the second lowest tax burden in the nation when you factor everything in our per capita tax burden. So we are at least where we need to be in terms of low taxes. Now, we know ultimately that our long-term competitiveness turns on the skills of our workforce. And by pulling $30 million out of the general fund that funds education, this bill makes us far less economically competitive with our neighboring states and with the world. And we are never going to be competitive if we keep robbing our schools just to line the pockets of our wealthiest citizens. So with that, I ask for your no vote.
Is there further debate?